Sup guys? With Hakuryuu getting her fate simulation recently, her damage has increased substantially. In this video, I'm going to find out if she has finally caught up to, or perhaps even overtaken, Shinano. Before the fate sim, they dealt about the same amount of damage when sortied solo, but together, Shinano's buffs would provide Haku with upward of 30% damage depending on enemy stats and number of airstrikes. The fate simulation itself gives Haku around 20% damage. And with that, I think I just gave the answer away, but regardless, let's take a look at the numbers. The regular EX stage that I've been testing everything else on is a bit too squishy, so I ran these tests against the custom EX mode, checking off the 50% anti-air bonus and 30% reduced damage taken from aviation. I also checked off the firepower damage reduction if needed, so that I can end the battle after the second round of airstrikes. For equipment, I used the same thing on both carriers. Sky Raider is a better option against medium than Tenrai, but we only have one and it comes with timing issues. I also used Implacable to make sure everything lands every time, and I chose a consistent Vanguard that would be able to end the fight after the second airstrike. It seems like the last bit of the airstrike finishes by the time 4 minutes and 13 seconds. And if it finished at or before 4 minutes and 13 seconds, I cannot be certain that all the damage from both ships had landed, so I only counted the runs that finished at 4 minutes and 12 seconds or later. And there was just a single run out of 11 that I had to discard due to that reason. Oh, and I only used Hazutsuki to proc Shinano's 3 IJN buff. I'm pretty sure that the Vanguard has no effect on the main fleet damage otherwise. As usual, both the data as well as the footage of the tests will be in the description. After doing 10 runs, I replaced Shinano with Albion, who offers no buffs to Haku. After another 10 runs with unbuffed Haku, I can now see how much Shinano had increased Haku's damage. Taking Haku's buff damage and dividing it by Haku's solo damage, we see that there is an increase of about 24% from Shinano's buffs. Then, I got their buff contribution, assuming Shinano contributed a 23.8% increase in Haku's damage, while Haku contributed an 8% increase in Shinano's with her lightning debuff. Taking away the buff portion from each other's damage, we get their damage if unbuffed by each other. And finally, after adding Shinano's buffs damage to Shinano's own damage and doing the same with Haku, it turns out that Shinano is still ahead of Haku, but it's much closer than before. Furthermore, there are still a few factors to consider. In favor of Haku, if her Siren Killer is in play, then they're pretty much even. If, for some reason, you aren't able to fit in a third IJN ship and Shinano doesn't get her aviation buff, Haku is actually stronger now. Usually, this shouldn't be a problem with the likes of Kazagumo, Musashi, Unzen, and so on, but you'll never know what the future might bring. On the other hand, Shinano's debuffs max out from the second airstrike onward, so if the battle allows for 3 or more airstrikes, her contribution would be even higher. Also, if you happen to run a third IJN carrier, then there's no contest between the two. Shinano's accuracy buff is barely in play as well, because the boss only has 20 evasion, and Implacable also comes with her own evasion debuff. Against the boss with higher evasion, this raises her value even further. And lastly, Shinano offers a lot to the Vanguard by reducing the enemy boss's offensive stats, buffing destroyers as a whole, and her debuff being permanent helps a lot more than Haku's 7-second debuff for Vanguards. These seemingly minor parts of her kit add up to a lot and are often neglected by people when considering her total value. Overall, I think Shinano is still better than Haku, but Haku has caught up to the point where there could be opportunities to consider her without Shinano now, whereas before you'd have a hard time justify using Haku solo over Enterprise. Now, she's going to be easily replacing Enterprise as the strongest solo carrier. As for Enterprise, who by the way is a day 1 SSR carrier who has never received a single buff, she still has a niche in being able to squeeze out an extra airstrike with Sky Raider due to Yorktown 2's cooldown reduction. So she'll still probably always deal more damage in light armor meta fights, but otherwise Haku will overshadow her from now on, which is fair enough for a DR ship. Anyways, that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed, and see you in the next one.